Welcome to the first in-person recorded episode of the SOapbox series. I'm your host. My name is Mindy Prefling, and I'm the Associate Director for Key and Strategic Accounts at Spencer, a global energy and infrastructure recruitment agency. Today, we're recording the Apex Clean Energy headquarters in Charlottesville, Virginia. And joining me today is Melissa Peterson, Head of Onshore Development Origination for Ørsted, Karlis Povisils, Senior President of Development at Apex Energy, and Julie, Head of Development for Steel Vestas. And I just want to thank Clean Energy for offering your team and your resource for producing today's episode. Really grateful. Our topic today is how to build an effective team. So before we get started, I thought it would be great to introduce our panelists on how they all know each other. They all work together at Apex Clean Energy for some time. But Melissa, why don't you kick us off? Where'd the relationship go back to?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a really long time. Jade and I actually met originally in 2012. We were both very young green developers. And at the time I was working for a company called EDF Renewable Energy, and Jade was working for a company called Cielo. And our two organizations were working together on an M&A transaction. And through that process, both of us being the developers on our respective projects, we sort of became friends over a year period of time and really kind of worked together professionally and started building a personal relationship. And so that's really what kicked off Jade and I getting to know each other. And I remember looking at her in the early days thinking like, she's another kind of rock star developer. And she's someone that I definitely want to keep in my contacts list. And so years went on. I ended up leaving EDF and went to work at Apex where I met Karlis. But over that period of time, was able to convince Jade to come work for the organization as well.
And the timing of that was perfect because we had a long time, one of the founding developers at Apex was leaving. And I remember it was a whipsaw because I'm like, oh my gosh, how on earth do we replace kids? And then meeting Jade, interviewing here and thinking like, Kid who? You know, and Kid is now back. So like he's back as well. So it was really a perfect, Jade's experience was perfect for what we needed at the time. And just was thrilled to be able to work with Jade for all those years and see her move from a developer working on particular projects to a leader.
And then I had to leave. Apex, and that was a really tough decision. Over the 4 years, Melissa had gone on to Ørsted by then, but that was a really tough departure. And going into Karlis's office, saying that I had an opportunity on the other side of the United States was really tough because of the team that we built here, that he builds. And so we stayed in touch. I mean, we talk probably every other month. Melissa and I stay in touch over the years and just really have supported one another in both professional growth and also now in the situations that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, a lot of which we're going to talk about today. But it's been like, to Melissa's point, when you find those rock stars that you can have in your corner over your career and help boost each other up, even though we're optically working for competitors, we're all trying to put steel in the ground. It does have a lot of the elements of how you build an effective team is, that trust and safety and investment in the people that really are awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that.
That professional network, it's so important. It's why it's important, the way folks move on to other opportunities. You need to keep those connections because you need that outside perspective and you lean on each other. You rely on each other. I mean, Melissa and I are even neighbors. It's still in Charlottesville.
I mean, I'm a really big believer in that kind of alumni concept, right? Like, I think, people are going to come into organization. There's always natural attrition. They're going to leave. And that's okay if your organization has an alumni network out there saying, I worked at Apex, or I worked at Steelhead, or I worked at Ørsted, and it was amazing. And I can vouch, I might not be there anymore, but I can vouch how great it was for the next generation to see that more senior group kind of still coalescing, having relationships and showing that we can work together as an industry, I think is just incredibly valuable.
Working together as an industry is very key in what we're facing today, as well as investing in these teams that we're creating. And then if you're really lucky, you can have boomerang people like Apex does, where a lot of people go out and they do great things and then they come back. Yeah. And I think that's, those are signs, right? That there's something really great here, and hopefully that we're also doing that in our other companies.
It does happen that people come back, and that's why I think it's important to believe in alumni networks. It's because, somebody who you think is great today, they're still great, even though they're going somewhere else. And the industry is still small enough that you're probably going to be working together in some form or fashion. You might do a transaction together, the person may come back. It happens often enough that I have almost like a stock mini speech that I give, which is, I want you to be successful where you're going next. But for whatever reason, something happens. Back porch lights on, keys under the mat. Just, you come back and it's going to be fun.
That's a good little dad quote, right?
Well, it's been an honor to get to spend some time with you all as a group the last few weeks. I can really see the respect and admiration and friendship that you all have together. So thank you for sharing that with me and our audience today. So our topic today is how to build an effective team. To start us off, I thought it would be good to define and talk through what is servant leadership.
So I've been thinking a lot about that. For me, it's looking at a lot of the different aspects of leadership through the lens of support. What does the team need in order to continue to be successful and supplied on a sustainable, repeatable basis? And so that lens governs a lot of how I think about these things. And so when I'm going out to travel to support somebody on a site, it's not to be the center of attention. It's because there's work to do, and I'm able to be close to the work. And the people I'm out visiting with, they can see that I see what they're doing, and the fact that I'm doing the work alongside them, whether that's talking to landowners, talking to public officials, or even just reading from a script. Like a developer will tell me, I need you to go into this room with this county official. I need you to say these 5 things in this kind of tone. This is what they're going to say. Here's what you're going to say back. I'm going to attach these puppet strings on your hands and arms and move your mouth, and you're going to do these things for the good of the project. And I say, of course, that's what needs to happen right now. And it's not just about what the projects need. It's also about what the employees need, and what does somebody need in this particular moment? What kind of experience do they need? And it's looking through that lens of support for the portfolio, support for the company, support for the individual people. Probably just say the same thing 3 or 4 more times, but that I'll pause there.
Yeah. So it's like showing your team that you can roll up your sleeves, you can do this job, and you're happy to support them wherever they are within their development at that time.
Yes, it's that. I think there's also, I put a pretty heavy weight on consensus building. Like I might have an idea in my head about what needs to happen next in terms of the direction of the company or the shaping of the portfolio. And I'll build support for that by having conversations one-on-one or in small groups, and have a willingness to have my mind changed. That just because I think this might be the way to do it, I'm going to hear something that's going to cause me to maybe shift and have micro shifts of the position, or even maybe major shifts. So by the time that we unveil something, people see their fingerprints on it. They'll say, all right, he listened, because that part of it was my contribution to this. And it's messy and it takes longer, but I think it's more sustainable.
Well, it's buy-in, right? I think that what Karlis just painted for us is like when you have the bottom, instead of being the top down, which used to be traditionally how we thought work had to get done, is the top had all the, direction, and you just operated that out. That was what you executed on. And now we're seeing the value of the work product in our line of, and just, in our line of work, it's building a project, developing a project, that the execution level, the people actually doing the work, are the best ones to really advise on what needs to get done. And servant leadership, again, I agree with all that Karlis said, is more looking at the people's skill up. Like it's a layering of what the goals are, or what our mutual goal is together, and coupling that with the skill set and the tools that your team has to succeed, filling in where the gaps are, finding the appropriate balance, giving people, both putting them in a place to succeed based on their current skill set and talent, but also supplementing that with professional growth. So you're building or you're developing a project, but it's also a place where people can feel ownership of the success, that they have decision-making authority on their various levels. And that way, in the end, as Karlis said, the end product is a piece of them, that they have ownership. And I think the people in our industry, the professionals that are emerging in our industry, are really driven by purpose and some kind of I created this, I'm doing this, I'm putting in my energy, and this is the output. And they really want to see the fruits of their labor. And that is where top-down approach of direction is not as if, it needs to play a lesser part. We need to keep the guardrails there. We need to give you a really clear intent. We need to produce and deliver. But the actual direction on how we do that, the building blocks, that should come from the people that are doing the work.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the title, right, servant, I think when you're the leader, it's a recognition and an embodiment as a leader of like, part of my job is to make decisions or, have great strategic vision, but also it is to serve those people who are doing the actual work, right? They are in different stages of their career development. They're working on different projects. They have different needs. And I, as a leader, need to come to them a little bit as, hey, you tell me what you need to support you, whether that's guidance in this, whether that's a safe space to talk through a people problem, right? Whatever it is you need as the leader, I'm supposed to help serve you. That doesn't mean I do whatever you say. That means that I'm an available resource to help you get to the next level in your career, the next level in the projects, the next level in the progression of where we're going. And I think that's a shift in the mindset, I think, of the leader too, right? And it's not just I sit at the top and I tell everyone what to do. It's part of my responsibility as a leader is to serve the people that are working for me. Mm-hmm. And that's an honor to do that, right? Because they're the ones who are doing a lot of that hard work, that on the ground stuff. I think that's just a continual kind of recognition of what servant leadership is in my mind.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe I think we all agree that servant isn't our favorite word, but it does work here. I like how you described that, Melissa, that servant leadership is that you're serving your team. And then it also sounds like it takes quite a bit more time. But in the end, it's worth it. Jade, you touched on this a little bit of how over time people just take more ownership of their roles and by having more license in their position and feeling more confident and competent in their roles. It creates more longevity and more buy-in over time is what I'm hearing. But is there ever a time that maybe a more directive approach is better?
I think that there are individual occasions where you have to, if you were on a submarine and it's sinking, you don't have time to poll the whole crew about what you're going to paint the inside of the stateroom the next day. You have to make a decision to try to keep the thing from blowing up. And so there are very few situations in my mind where you would have to do that. I think you can get quite a lot done with nudging from the side. We're not in life or death situations like a sinking submarine where you have to take that captain of the ship, iron fist type approach. I just haven't seen it. You often have a little bit more time than you think to take a second and be able to check in with folks. That's my personal view.
That's still the type of servant leadership, though. At the end of the day, if you have to make a tough decision as the leader and you make it, that you're still serving your team because the decision had to be made and someone has to take it. If nobody's taking it, you also are in a position that's not great, right? There's points in time where you just got to make a decision, and that's part of leading and serving your team and getting to the next stage. Someone has to kind of grab the ball a little bit.
Yeah, there are durations for decisions. There's a time for talking about it, and then you do need to decide. And sometimes consensus isn't reached, and you have to, especially if you think the decision is going to be unpopular, you have to own it.
Yeah.
You can't delegate that to someone else. Hey, deliver this bad news and have it be your decision. No.
Yeah.
This bad news is my call, and I'll take the heat.
And I think a big part that we're learning as, the term servant leadership, and I like how Melissa pointed out that making decisions is part of servant leadership, but we now have more importance. It's putting more importance on the feedback as to why we made the decision. So yes, cohesive and or consensus building is really important, but so is then feeding back the decision, the why you did it to the appropriate parties. And I think, what we're a still growing team, still it is still very small. Feedback we took for granted because we were small. And now that we're getting to a larger size and we are a remote environment, and I think that both Ørsted and Apex have this too, is like, how do you make sure that those feedback channels exist and are effective, and that people feel that they heard what I said, they didn't do what I said, but now I know why. That is so important to feed that servant leadership environment or culture.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because that was on my mind. A lot of what we're talking about here feels very much like us as leaders own the servant leadership, but really it's a culture, right? It's something that you have to create not only within your team, but within the organization. How can we create accountability within an organization to be servant leadership?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Mindy. And I think it starts from the very beginning, right? It's sort of the culture that you embed, not just day one when they get into the organization, but even during the recruiting process, right? This kind of expectation that this is what's expected and this is how we operate. And this is kind of what's on your responsibility on an employee coming in this organization. My view is that employees are just as much responsible for servant leadership and their own career growth as their boss, right? Again, the leadership helps serve them and guide them, but employees need to come in with, a vision of what they're trying to get out of it, and starting that from that beginning and having those conversations day one, those expectation settings is really helpful to kind of progressing this process forward and getting that culture built in. And then kind of having continual touch point. Jade talked about the feedback, great one-on-one, but also kind of the team buy element, right? At the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same goal. Is everyone bought in on that goal? Are we all believe that that is the right goal, right? And once you have that kind of dynamic where everyone's like, yeah, we're on a team, we're all trying to win the Super Bowl together, right? If you've got one person who's like, wait, I thought we were playing basketball when you're, playing football, that's a huge problem. So like making sure that the whole team understands the objectives, the goals, and the long-term vision, and not just understands it, buys into it, I think is super important.
And I think it's harder to be an effective servant leader if you're the only one with that leadership type in your organization. So I'm grateful that servant leadership is the predominant leadership style at Apex, and it's also the predominant leadership style of the leaders that I've elevated on my team. They have that, and so that it just you kind of get that virtuous cycle. They benefited from the servant leadership. Now they've elevated to a point where they now can have that same that same approach, and it creates a culture where that's the expectation.
Yeah, I would add that the culture takes a lot of continuous attention, right? Like you don't just start day one and there it is and exists. It's like, it does need watering, it needs nourishing. And so you create this culture, you're working really hard to create a culture of accountability, right? Where everyone wants to win the Super Bowl. So therefore they have expectations of their fellow peers and their managers and the people that are on their team of, excellence, which can be taken in different ways, but everyone wants to succeed and win, right? Everyone wants to do a good job, feel good when they leave. And as a servant leader, as a leader of those organizations, it takes constant vigilance and effort into the cohesion of the team and where the pinch points are growing and where they're starting. It's like yesterday's challenges that you overcame are not tomorrow's. And as a leader, you have to really take care to say, okay, that process, that way that we did it yesterday is not working for today's reality. And knowing and having the insight, the sensitivities to say, okay, we've got to make a change, and then start that process and bringing everybody. It's like a cyclical thing. And because I tell you, as soon as you take your eye off of that, it's like it changes, right? The next day.
What the old saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know what they say. I've heard that.
I haven't heard that.
Oh,
yeah, that sounds right.
It's culture is so important, right? And I think you're making a good point, though. Culture also can evolve a little, right? So it's not, this is the culture and that's it. It's each time you're learning and growing as a team, that's evolving slightly, right? And making sure that you're always have your kind of mind on that and you're prioritizing that. And that's how you start meetings. That's what you talk about as a team. Of course, you can talk about the tactics of the business, not saying that's not important, but that underlying culture of the team and the people needs to be a huge focus. And in a lot of ways, probably more of the focus always sometimes than kind of the tactics or the blocking and tackling, the day-to-day activities of getting the business done.
And I think everybody needs to be enlisted in that effort to keep the culture intact and evolving. Like that can't be just the objects of the leaders.
Okay, so creating accountability on both sides, mutual accountability here starts, as Melissa said, at the beginning. During my favorite process in recruitment. Okay, but then it evolves and it needs to be continuously focused on over time, because it doesn't just like, okay, I said it, now the expectation is there. It constantly needs to be reminded. So if we take it back to that recruitment part, is if we're trying to build an effective team, again, we go back to that recruitment phase. What is the role of recruitment in building an effective team?
Well, as we're flying it, right? And that's a completely different environment than my counterparts here. They have really strong business tactics and, processes in place that you can leverage. And so it's really, what is that individual looking for in their next step, and marrying that so that it's a complement wherever they want to go. Because I don't think that every professional can just succeed in each environment. Like, it's really should be curated. You need to know the applicant. What is the applicant looking for in this next professional move? How then does that company help foster and elevate that and help them take it to the next level is so important, because we don't want to waste each other's time. We want to be very transparent of what we are and what we're not, and what we can provide to you.
I'm going to jump in and ask a question to you, Jade. Value prop is, and because I love this quite this conversation, value prop is so interesting. So, like, of course, compensation is part of this, right? But like, in your mind, what else is part of value prop? Because I think you're hitting on something that's super, super important. People instantly will go to the compensation, and I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about that. That's important. We all need to pay our bills. But there's so much, I think, that's lost. And so, like, in your mind, what do you see as value prop outside of the compensation?
Are you running this interview?
I know, but I love this. I'm interviewing.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. I mean, this industry, as we all know, has the compensation title thing is definitely front and center, right? That's one of the first things that people ask about. And to me, the value proposition is the whole package. It is where you have been and where you're trying to go, and whether or not that company or the scope of work that is important to us right now is important to our next chapter. How does that complement it? And how are we going to mutually benefit from rounding out your resume to make you a much better professional than when you came in? And that is, to me, what the recruitment whole package is. How is your work-life, what is your definition of work-life balance or work-life integration? Like, what does that mean to you? What are you trying to achieve in this, 5-year, 10-year period? It's just a very important conversation to have that extends beyond, well, I'm just going to make a ton of money and I'm going to have a great title.
Like, what are the series of experiences that the candidate can expect? What is the company trying to accomplish? And they're either going to be jazzed about that and want to take that ride with you, like help you build the plane as you're flying it, or they'll say, I'm looking for more of I'm looking for a larger steady state. I'm looking to be able to highly specialize. Like, well, we're looking for generalists, and it's making sure there's that match. And I think it's on the candidate side too. Us looking at the candidate looking at the company needs to understand what the company's values are, and it's not just about like what are the stated values, but also what are you really trying to do? What are the experiences and scope I can expect if I join this team? But we as employers need to look at the candidates to try to ascertain, beyond the individual, this person's good at X, Y, or Z, is this person going to contribute to the culture? But there's some places that have a very mercenary, eat what you kill, which is a phrase that drives me bananas, because the people that are usually destroying value instead of creating it. But they might have a very mercenary, I'm going to be this hard charger and, I'm not going to be your bud, but, I'm going to get these different things done. And that, like, you'll get the resume, they've jumped around every 2 years or so. I'm not really interested in that person, even if they're really accomplished in what they're doing. I'm more interested to see, like, somebody's stuck around places. They're now looking now, but I look and see they've been somewhere 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, 7 years. And then how do they talk about the job? There's certain things I listen for. How are they talking about land work? Are they a striver only, or do they recognize the things that we really need to accomplish here and have bought into those? Or are they just looking to punch a ticket and gain some little check mark on their resume to move on to the next thing? Because that's a waste of time for us to hire somebody. They're here for a year and then you're right back looking again. You could have waited a little longer to find the right fit. The left fit all the time either, but it's a shorthand.
It works here.
Yeah.
I would give you guys an A+ in the School of Recruitment, because it sounds like as leaders, you're really fleshing out during your recruitment process what really motivates a candidate. And it's true, there's kind of these two distinct conversations we have in recruitment. What motivates you? What's your compensation? And how do these align? And if they need to your point, Melissa, like, you got to pay the bills, and there's a market value for what people are bringing to the table. But that market value has been inflated quite a bit the last few years. I think we can all agree, and we've talked about to a big degree, but a lot of leaders are really good at what they do, but they don't necessarily know how to interview and flesh out with the candidate what it is that they're really looking for, and if the value proposition that, say, Vestas has on offer matches up with what it is that they're looking for.
What's your answer, Melissa?
On what value prop is? I mean, I think I would echo everything you all said, right? Like, I don't necessarily think I have anything new. It's been interesting because I've, done a little bit of recruiting now in the kind of molecular green hydrogen space. And then because of that, we've actually been recruiting a little bit more from the kind of oil and gas majors than we ever had before, which has been interesting because coming from a completely renewable background, I've only ever looked at people that sort of had that renewable checklist. And I kind of moved into this and started talking to people in the oil and gas space and have been incredibly surprised, pleasantly surprised too. Yeah, I can teach you some of the renewable fundamentals, but the values and the culture that they're bringing has been super great, right? Like, they're coming from a background that's very rigid. There's a lot of processes in place, a lot of plans, a lot of organizations, but there's also a lot of buying into the culture of that company. And so they're believers. And you see these people that have 10 years of Exxon or, these big brand names shifting into renewables because they have an interest now in moving into the clean energy space, but they're bringing that sort of loyalty and consistency and commitment that's just phenomenal. And so it's been interesting for me to kind of think, hey, maybe we should think a little bit more outside the box. Let's say, if we're really trying to find people who have the right value prop and that lines up, I can teach some stuff, right? You don't have to be perfect. Do I want to teach the culture and the values, or do I want to teach the more technical hard skills? And, you can find some really great candidates that you're a little bit flexible in that space as well. So I think that's been an interesting kind of experience I've had over the last 2 to 3 years, just kind of branching out a little bit in terms of my recruitment style and recruitment area.
Melissa said a word that I think we should expand on a little bit, is that loyalty piece. And it does bridge into both recruitment, but also building an effective team. Is getting the right person on the bus is so important to that loyalty. And this is going to be different for every candidate, right? That's why as a leader, knowing your value proposition, knowing what you're looking for, and knowing what kind of professional is going to succeed in that space is really important conversation to have on the early end, because that is going to feed the loyalty that then feeds the effective team. You can't build an effective team if you don't know what loyalty is for you. And that, as I was saying, kind of changes as the culture changes and more people come in and add to the culture. But like, having that fundamental priority on loyalty is important starting from day one.
It's so tough to have us maintain a successful team if they're all mercenaries. If they're all mercs that are going to leave for like $5,000 or even 15 or 20 grand. I just, you can't live that way. It's too exhausting. You're going to have a chunk of your folks that maybe are that way. And that might be like, look, we need a whole lot more people in this industry too. So we've had a lot of success hiring young people right out of college, and to say like, all right, they don't have any experience right now, but they've got upside potential. And in 2 years, in less than 2 years, in some cases, you're going to know if they're rock stars or not. And there's a lot of really, really great talent coming out just right out of college.
Yeah, there's the most people in renewable energy than there ever has been right now. And then in order to continue to grow the industry, obviously we need to grow the talent pool. I like what you said, Melissa, about how Ørsted is hiring outside of oil or within oil and gas, or, within similar industries and building up. And it's your responsibility as a leader then to train them up and develop their skills to get them to be able to work in this industry. And then the next resource pool is going to be new entrants into the market coming out of college, mostly, or Gen Z. So I think that's a fun new segue for us because nobody in this room is in Gen Z. So I'm curious how you all have adapted, or maybe think you need to adapt in order to communicate and recruit this generation.
I'm still learning. No, it's fun. We have some Gen Zers on my team, and it's been, I've approached it with, ears open sometimes, mouth shut, which for people that know me isn't always my favorite place to sit. I'd like to talk.
What?
So, I think I tried to approach it in that way and just kind of be more of a listener, especially in the beginning, to understand kind of how they think about things, what's their mindset, how are they approaching problems. But I think, all of us, right, are, in a workplace, you're going to have multi-generations, right? There's the Gen Z, there's the millennials, there's the Gen X, is that above the millennials?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And then there's the boomers, right? There's those types of people still in every workplace. And so it's a constant kind of learning how to work together. And I don't have a right answer, and I don't think anybody does. Anyone who says they does, I wouldn't buy into it. But I think it's being open to adapting and changing as well, right? As a leader, I'm always willing to have feedback around how I can do things differently or better, recognizing that I'm not perfect either. And I'm still on my own journey as a leader, growing and evolving. And so that feedback is good, and that works kind of two ways. So
I think one of the challenges for me with Gen Z folks, my wife coined a term 2 days ago, Geezers. I like. We have phenomenal employees in Gen Z here. They're hard workers. They're really driven. The challenge for me as a leader is Gen Z typically does not value experience in terms of measured in years. It's more like they seem to think of things as a tick box. Like, well, I've done that, so I know how to do that. Like, well, but judgment and wisdom is gained over a period of years. And that part is the part that is really is resistant. And I've had to learn to, it's listening, it's thinking, okay, they're not necessarily saying, I've been here 6 months, I need to be in charge, although they do say that.
Not all of them.
Yeah, not all of them. But they're looking for, they want to understand what the path is, even if it's not like right this minute, like, okay, I had this good year or I had this setback. What do I need to change? What do I need to lean into? I think they're expecting to have conversations more frequently around their careers. And I have always thought that leaders tend to shy away from having those conversations, and they shouldn't. Like, it's not, doesn't have to be scary. Like, just because somebody's talking about their career doesn't mean they're hitting you up for a raise right in that moment, maybe the next moment. You have to be able to just have that comfort to have those conversations, and you're building trust over time. They can see like, okay, this isn't, I think Gen Z sometimes maybe looks at a Gen Xer and says, oh, here's a guy that's going to make me wait 10 years before I can be promoted into a position of authority. And to say, like, that's not the case. We're not looking at people, rank ordering them solely on the basis of years of experience. Experience does matter, but so do accomplishments, so do skills, so does attitude. and loyalty, I think, is a piece of that too.
Yeah, I think we too, have a lot of Gen Z on our team, and to Melissa's point, it's learning how to communicate with them effectively, and to Karlis's point, it's the transparency of this is what the expectations are to continue to progress in your profession. And you can't understate the length of time that you were talking about, that it's not just the tactical capabilities that you should focus on, but the behavioral competencies. And that just comes with the time and having done things in a variety of different ways, dealing with different type of people, learning how to have empathy. When you're a leader, it's not just that I can go out and negotiate 6 tax abatements a year. It's I feel what my team is saying to me, and I'm helping direct them. I'm giving them the feedback, the guardrails. Like, there's a lot of intelligence that just pure interaction on the job training that you go through. I'm still in training too with Melissa's. Like, I have conversations all the time that just don't go well, right? I'm like, well, I got to figure out how to pivot that one. But it's like, so, that can't be prescribed in, well, you told me to go sign 16 land, leases, and I did it. So now I need a promotion. Like, it's really the behavioral competencies that we need to just teach them and show them what value that will bring to the overall package of not just them as a professional, but then again, the effective team.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you all say is really, as a leader, we're all in and leaders, we are all in training, and we need to have that growth mindset. Bringing in a new generation of thought and experience is no different than maybe what we've done in the past. It just feels like the time and space is a bit bigger now. So really meeting with your team, meeting with these new people, these new employees in the market, understanding with compassion what their motivations are, what drives them, and what it is that they're seeking in their career, and then managing expectations on how to get there. I know you want to be, in this leadership role now. To get there, these are the competencies you need to develop. And I mean, that's really all you can do, right? But still being able to be adaptable as a leader.
I think that you do have to be adaptable, as much as we might think we've set up a perfect system of, here's a title progression, here's generally speaking what we have it written down, like this is what these different paths look like, and trying to break the link of getting ahead means you have to manage people directly. No, not the case. But you do need to, especially in a really frothy recruiting market like this one is, you got to be open to changing your mind about things and evolving, and say, are there other paths? Are there ways, maybe not shortcuts, but you can't be so rigid to say this title means you have this many years of experience. In our white paper on this, we specifically don't have specific numbers of years in some of these things to give ourselves a little bit of flexibility. But we're saying we expect you to have these kinds of experiences and have, so many transactions or so many different types of accomplishments, not just that you did it once.
Yeah. Because, they're bringing a lot of value to our industry. They're the ideas and the tools that they've learned, and just, giving them, and I think that's where servant leadership, luckily, is being kind of forced. Like this conversation, what we're working on, what we're embracing and trying to implement in our respective companies is like they thrive in that environment, because for them to feel really successful, they need to feel like they've had a voice, that they have an impact, that they're going towards a mission, and that they believe in what they and their team are doing. And so they're passionate. And I like how we're also, trying to figure out how best to incorporate all the generations and learn from one another, show the value of the boomers and the Gen Xers and the millennials, and how we all can, find cohesion, if you will, and elevate one another as a group, and, really bring a place where everyone's talents and everyone's kind of generational skill sets or tendencies can support the bigger picture.
Yep. Go ahead.
I'll say, I mentor quite a few Gen Zers in my career, and one of the advice I always give to them, and I think you were kind of feeling this, Karlis, is like, stop focusing on, number of years experience, or you did these things, and focus on the experience, right? Focus on the skill you're building. Focus on looking at, okay, what do I want to build in the next 12 months in terms of new skills for my resume? Don't worry about the time. I think that's what, as leaders, we want to see them to get off of the, well, how many steps till I get to be a manager? And then how many steps till I get to be a senior manager? And that's different for every person. That's been different for all of our own journeys. Really, as a Gen Z, like the advice I always try to give was like, focus on what skills you're trying to build and the experience while you're having. And I think that's something I just like want to reiterate to them, especially if there's anyone listening today, like that's what you should think about, right? Think about your career long-term and then short-term and say, I want to build these skills. How best do I do that? The titles will come. If you're doing a good job and if you're working hard and if you're delivering value, the titles will come.
I agree with all of that. I also think that there is one of the parts for the leaders to play is the way opportunities are provided. I remember in my first boss in a professional job, it was a very conservative place to work. And it was a kind of place where, you can't expect to do, it was in state government working for the legislature. You can't expect to be a committee aide until you've been here for X amount of months or years. You can't expect to work on large pieces of legislation there's a lot of like as a young person coming in, you're holding someone's briefcase and watching forever. And my boss had a different approach. Her approach was, I'm going to let you take this chance and I'm going to spot you. I'm not in the front. I'm in no way taking any credit for anything, but I'm going to be behind you in case something happens, or if you need me, or if you falter, you drop the weight, I'm going to keep you from crushing yourself. And that has stuck with me because this was a place where the other leaders didn't have that approach. And she let me take chances early in my career. And it was a huge impact on my trajectory all the way back to that 1998. I remember thinking like, I'm going to remember this because I'm going to be in her position someday. And I want to be able to give people these opportunities and be able to spot them instead of saying, you're going to carry this senior person's briefcase and you're going to go and watch them do work forever. And you're going to do the grunt work. Like, yes, we're going to have to do some grunt work, but you're going to be given this chance to do the real stuff earlier on. And I think that is a generational change that we need to embrace.
That sounds like your boss was ahead of her time.
Way ahead. She was.
Because I feel like this servant leadership and a lot of what we're talking about is still new territory, which is, I think, exactly why we're talking about it. So if we go back to how to build an effective team, we started with servant leadership. We talked about recruitment. I think we need maybe one more pillar to balance it out a little bit.
I always have to have 3.
Yeah, to have 3.
Yeah.
So I think the obvious next step would be, and we've talked a little bit about this, even with talking about different generations. So we're talking about inclusion, and then also diversity and equity within that. So what is the interplay with DE&I, servant leadership, and recruitment in building an effective team?
I think that's just it. It is all intertwined together, right? It is a good thing to see that DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, is becoming a natural or required fabric, a required element in the fabric of our teams, right? Every company, every team needs to say, what does diversity mean for us? How are we creating an equitable and inclusive environment? And how are we making sure that our individuals, our team members feel a sense of belonging? And, we can also layer in the concept of how safe do people feel to bring their own self and their own, their own journey to work, and almost like a humbleness or a vulnerability. How vulnerable can I be at work? How much can I push myself to go outside my comfort zone to do to challenge myself to do great work. What is the environment's perspective or culture on failure? Like, how safe do I feel to push the boundaries and that I might fail and that I have a spot behind me? Like, all those, I think, interplay with each company's definition of DEIB and the effect, like how the foundation of the effective team, all those elements I think are very crucial. I will say, like, it is hard to grow. It is back to it. There's a constant requirement to check in on your culture. And I think that the safety of pushing yourself and feeling okay with failure is something that can go away quickly. Like, I've seen an environment where we did have, we pushed each other. We had an expectation of excellence. And then overnight, it's almost like people started pointing fingers. And it's like, wait, what happened to our culture of holding each other up when we fail? Looking at what happened and then circling up as a group and saying, okay, how do we learn from this? And where do we go from here? And dealing with the situation at hand instead of saying, that wasn't my job, right? And it's amazing how quickly it can shift.
I think for me, it starts with the women are great developers. African Americans are great developers. People from all kinds of different backgrounds are great developers, but you won't get a diverse candidate pool on its own. Like, it doesn't just happen on its own. So I remember seeing this because I came on when Apex was a startup, and you're just trying to stay solvent. You're trying to get that first project done, and you don't have an HR team. You can't afford recruiters. It's my nephew knows somebody who whatever, and you're just, okay, bring them in. They sound good. You're shoveling folks into bullet. But the people that know the founder, whose dads know the founder, they're white dudes. And so if you just leave it to just take care of itself, it'll be all white dudes. Because they're the ones that have these connections. They're the ones that belong to the golf club and they have these, I know a guy that knows a guy. So if you're relying on that, that's what you're going to get. And that's what we got early on. And part of growing up as a company was recognizing it's through working with really great folks like Melissa and Jade is, okay, we're only getting we're getting lucky, and some of these people that know somebody are great. A lot of them aren't, and you get a lot of churn. We've had a whole lot less churn as we've gotten more professional in our recruiting, and it starts with you need diverse pools. You need a diverse pools of really great candidates, because you're not going to hire somebody if you're not interviewing them. You're not going to interview them if you're not seeing their resume in the first place. And so how do you do that? So we're getting away from enough with these like personal, family, friends and types of stuff. We're trying to do fewer like Nepo babies. Oh, well, this person's the son or daughter of, like, my son, I hope, gets into renewables. Not here. He needs to go earn it somewhere else. And then if he's really good, and then I'm retiring someday, then maybe he can apply for something to be here. It's about, open competitive processes for things like promotions. Because in the past, they typically are, who are you comfortable with? You're probably comfortable with someone who looks just like you. But if you have open competitive processes, even if somebody has a lot more experience and it just looks like it's going to go in a certain direction, you're building that expectation of, when there's an opening, there's going to be an opportunity, and people can surprise you. I remember there was an early opportunity for a leadership position on our team, and it was in a region that was very challenging. And Jade raised her hand and said, I'm interested in competing for this. And it was really, really close. She didn't get it. How we helped her career, because it was kind of a set up to fail sort of a position in the Northeast, very tough, very, very tough place. Maybe. Maybe. And it was it was really a horse race. We thought, like, okay, great. Like, anybody who's a certain title can apply. And she didn't get that one. But then very quickly thereafter, we didn't even do a process. We just said, yeah, you got this one. And it changed how we saw you. As you said, like, this would be my vision for, here's how I would approach this type of role. And we saw so much good there that went from seeing Jade as a developer to seeing Jade as a leader. And so you have to make those opportunities available. It's like when somebody runs for office, maybe they don't win on the very first time, but it changes how you see that person. And so you have to do these things. You have to have the discipline around the recruiting. You have to have the discipline around promotions, because you may not see it. You may think I can see everything. You don't. But when you have these more formal aspects there, it helps you correct your own point of view of things.
When I think about DI, it's a lot of, in my mind, trying to find people that will have a diversity of thought, right? I mean, of course, we're talking about things like skin color and gender, and those are outward diversity, and those are, we've talked about those, but also it's really about trying to build teams that have a diversity of thought, because that's how you get high caliber teams, is then you have people who are coming with different perspectives and different backgrounds and different visions together to ultimately create the best product and the most high performing team. And so, taking it back from the recruiting side, it's really about, this goes a little bit to what I was talking about earlier, recruiting from oil and gas, diversity in the recruiting side as well, right? Like promotions, yes, but also as a recruiting, how do we increase our pool of candidates that have diversity of thought? And thought means a lot of things, their backgrounds, where they're coming from, their experiences, all that. How do we bring that into the table so that we can create those high caliber teams? Because I, have always had fears that when people talk about DEI, it sort of becomes a check the box exercise. And I think that misses the point, right? The point is trying to get people to bring unique perspectives into a team that will then coalesce together and build its own culture and make a really highly effective, highly efficient, highly caliber team. And that's what you're ultimately trying to achieve. And how you go about that, there's going to be different avenues. There's internal promotions and more time on that. There's recruiting using, folks like yourself, but also like tapping into new industries or tapping into school programs that you might not think about. Not every college has a renewable energy program, but maybe their environmental science program or their engineering program. Being more diverse in how you're approaching the marketplace to get new candidates, I think, is really important as we're trying to build these diverse teams overall.
And I think it's fair to ask, some people might say, if you're a doubter, you'd say like, all right, does the diverse points of view really matter? Here's a real world example of it mattering. For the longest time, we've all been in development. The longest time the approach to a new site is you go to the largest landowner, you're going to the big Mahaf, you're talking to usually him, and you're going to let that conversation take as long as it does. And only when that person seems like they're ready to go, then you go to the next largest and the next largest and the next one. And that's the way it had been for 10 plus years. We moved to a centralized system of hiring and managing land agents. And a woman on our team, Karen Earhart, we hired her as she was a consultant. She was managing a handful of really successful land agents. And she had a different idea. And her most successful land agents in turn were women too. And they had their thought was, why are you going just to one person at first? You can go talk to a bunch of people and at the same time and blitz it, and you can get to a decision faster by talking to me. And it sounds so obvious, but I think the ingrained resistance to that was, well, no, you got to talk to the big guy. You got to talk to the big guy. You can't talk to the little guys. But Karen didn't have that same, Karen and Santa and Rebecca, they didn't have that same hang up. Like, that's the way you always did it. And that's now our default approach is we go broad fast. And instead of taking 18 months to make a site control decision, you're going to move forward on a site, we now do that in 4 months, 6 months. So the funnel narrows more quickly. And it was, I just don't know. Would someone else have come up with that? Maybe. But I have to think that her and her team brought that different point of view there. And it changed fundamentally how we do a really core part of our job.
I think we see every day the value of diversity of thought.
Yeah.
I think something that's a really important element of this conversation, though, is, and I've learned a lot at Vestas about this, is making the environment of which the diverse individuals come to an accepting environment. There are certain things that members of diverse communities really need is a support function in the group, and it's different from what our industry has. And so there's tools that the individuals of diverse cultures or upbringings or gender, race, cultural ethnicity need to feel like they are welcome. A training that kind of has to happen at the fundamental level, how their peers are understanding pronouns, right? I mean, I think there's trends that we all see coming, and it really, to me, may seem like, can't we just get the work done? But it fundamentally impacts their effectiveness to know whether or not they're welcome as their whole self. And I think that's where the conversation has benefited us in the servant leadership effective teams, but that we really do need to be humble and be like, say, you know what, I'm on a journey. Like I say this all the time. I'm on my own journey, figuring this conversation out. And I'm not going to be perfect every single time, but I want you to teach me. I want to understand more how I create a space that you feel like you can kick, that you can succeed and kick butt, right? And let's have a good time. Let's like have fun doing it. And that really is like, I think the piece of me acknowledging as a leader is like, I'm going to mess up, and I really want you to help me get there.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of things, but I think, because I like to summarize things, what I'm hearing is we need to be really creative and intentional about how we're recruiting for people into the industry, and make sure that we're being conscientious about hiring diverse people into the industry because of all the reasons, all the benefits of having diverse teams. But then not only that, once you hire diverse folks into your organizations, committing to the programs that retain this group of individuals, whatever that is, be it sex, gender, race, whatever the case may be.
Setting folks up for success and listening. Look, what is it that's going to help you unlock your potential?
People listening to this podcast could be at any point of their career. They could be entry level through to C-suite. So any last words for our audience on our subject today, our topic today?
Oh, okay. You want to go first?
Yeah, Karlis first.
Yeah. Well, first I would say, as a lead into that, is we need a lot more people in this industry, and there just aren't enough. So it can't just be people that already have the experience. And so it's going to be career switchers coming from oil and gas. It's going to be people coming, project managers coming from almost any industry can come in here, and or even folks coming right in from college. But as you're thinking about your career and what you're looking for, it's getting beyond the comp. And I'm not saying that as an excuse that we're like, oh, we want to pay you less. It's like, what is going to really energize you? What's going to bring out your best work? What's going to keep you motivated and excited to come to work every day? And development's a hard job. So if you're going to have this hard job, you need those other extras. You need that sense of purpose. And it's what leadership styles are going to motivate you. What do you want to see from your colleagues? What do you want the culture to look like? And that's not a passive thing. Like, you're investigating that in the recruiting process. And if you find the right place and you're there, it's chipping in, rolling up your sleeves and helping that culture, the thing that attracted you in the first place, making it better, making sure that everything continues to evolve and stays healthy. It's just like being a partial architect of your own, your work satisfaction in your career. And as leaders, being willing to you're spending a lot of time attending to that, but then also recognizing you're going to get inputs from a lot of different places. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that was great, Karlis. I've worked at a couple of different companies now. When I look back at different roles I've had in the different companies, the one thing that I've seen throughout all of them, and any successful company I've been a part of, is it's the people, right? At the end of the day, the people make the company. The people that are showing up every day, working hard, being open to feedback, listening, bringing their ideas to the table, that's what makes a company. That's what makes the culture, and that's what makes a success, and that's what's driving the business forward. And so, if you're listening to this, I would really encourage you to Karlis's point too, like, think about your own career, bring your best self to work, share your vision, share your ideas, but also open your ears sometimes, right? Sometimes it's just as important to listen as it is to talk. And that's, how you can help shape and grow and be a part of a fantastic organization that's achieving great things for the company and for the world and for the climate. So
yeah, I'll layer onto that is that we have a big job ahead of us. Like, this is a big effort, and to attack it as an individual is not going to get us there. That understanding all the elements that we talked about, from, you know, to the listeners, whatever, if you are a professional or a leader or a CEO or thinking about growing your own business, yes, we need help in this industry to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. But you know, how you approach the teamwork aspect of it, or lifting, a rising tide lifts all boats mentality, that is what's going to help us get closer to our goal.
This feels like a really good place for us to stop. Thank you so much for all your inspirational messages and sharing all your thoughts with me here today. Jade, Karlis, Melissa, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate you joining me. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in, and stay tuned for more information on our next episode.